All right, everyone, and welcome to edition 2 of the 2017 Integrity Racing Show. Sorry for the lapse in coverage of the Integrity Racing League. Started officiating soccer myself, and the season just recently wrapped up, and that was taking most of my Tuesday. So I was just able to get back into the Truck Series last week on Tuesday night. Was able to run again tonight, and Jacob and I decided it was time to pick the show back up. So we're eager, ready, and willing to get back to work here to try to get you guys updated on some discussion of the Integrity Racing League. So, Jacob, as an administrator of the league, I think we are 11 weeks into the season so far on the Cup side, and probably 7 or 8 races deep into the truck side. What's your evaluation of the league so far?
Well, I think we got off to a pretty decent start with a few of the races we had on both sides. Um, had have some trouble spots over the past few weeks, but hopefully, crossing our fingers that this past tonight's race and last night's race, I thought went relatively well. Tonight's race went really well. I think we just had one caution, and then last night, other than a couple bigger incidents, for the most part for Kansas, it was more to be what is expected from the guys who race with us. So hopefully we're on the upswing and are going to have the chance to have some better racing going through the mid part of our season.
And as part of that, let's go ahead and take a look at the 2017 Cup point standings. As we have done, it looks like 11 races this year. And so to bring those up, you see here, I'll try to zoom in there and hopefully everybody can see those at home. Andrew Fayash is your current points leader as the defending champion. He was able to complete all 11 races. And a tight points battle up there at the very front of the pack. And Adam had the points lead until he fell into some rough luck last night and got involved in an early incident. And so that allowed Andrew Fash to take over the points lead. Guillermo Alvarez, our winner at Talladega, the official winner there, is third. Jay Heisman, the namesake of the Heisman Way, is Heisman Way his way up to the fourth. Actually, a tie for third with Guillermo in the standings. And then Cody Smith wraps out your top five. He's going to be followed by Matt Busa, Josh Campbell, Jacob Fife, Brandon Kirkman, and then yours truly to round out the top 10. So Jacob, a lot of names that we're used to seeing up there in the top 10. Maybe a couple of surprises. I don't think a lot of people, I think even Heisman would say he wouldn't expect himself to be tied for third this deep into the season. But what have we seen, and what do you see out of the front runners so far this year?
Well, as usual, the cream rises to the top. I think that's going to be your general consensus with that, even though if you notice looking at the standings, Andrew hasn't won a race this year, which usually he's racked up at least a couple by now. But I think that speaks to the different drivers we have in the series who are winning races. Busa's done his fair share this year. He's been um, more current in racing with us this year as in the last maybe year and a half. So that's become evident to some extent. But I mean, just overall, there is a good amount of talent who can race towards the front of the field on a regular basis. It's just a matter of whether or not they get in trouble or something happens during the course of a race. So you'll see that shake up in terms of who's winning what. But once again, I think when you look at people who are consistent and are able to run cleanly, those people, as long as they have decent speed, will find their way towards the top of the point standings when all is said and done.
All right, and a new addition to this year to the Interior Racing Show is we're not going to discuss only the Cup Series. We're actually going to talk about the Truck Series in a little bit of detail as well. So let's go ahead and look at the Truck Series standings here. James Hudson, your current points leader after 10 races, and Jacob Five trailing him by 16 points. Guillermo Alvarez in third with in a tie for actually in third with let's see, about 19 points back of James there. Lance Gentles and Brendan Kohler are tied for fourth. Brendan's only been able to do 6 races so far this year, but he's got 3 victories. Matt Wright, Randy Fash, Brian Terry, Josh Buckley, and Greg Trigo round out your top 10. So I actually haven't been able to participate in this league a whole lot this season, Jacob. Only able to do the last two races. So you've been able to attend every single one. What have you seen out of this league, and who's standing out to you so far this season?
Well, I think from the top, it reminds you, if you've been with us for a really long time, it'll remind you of where we started. When we first started the league, we started with the Truck Series. That's a series that I ran in a previous league, and where I kind of cut my teeth as far as learning how to admin leagues and run things um, and that sort of deal. So having that, it takes me back, to our roots, so to speak, and it's fun. It's definitely a place where guys can come and race, and it be a more relaxed environment than the Cup Series. Because while both series are really competitive, I think the Cup Series is much more intense than the Truck Series, and it's an intentionally done to kind of have a different sort of atmosphere and environment in the two series. As far as the actual standings themselves, obviously Hudson's doing really well, leading the pack with that. I've had a couple decent races. I've had a couple bad races, and I think the chase format will be very similar to the Cup Series. So you'll see a few guys, as long as they make the minimum amount of races for the Truck Series, will come up and play a major factor who may not be as far up in the actual point standings right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out as we get closer to the chase cutoff later in the season.
All right, so let's go ahead and discuss the last two nights of racing that we've had in the Integra Racing League. Let's actually go ahead and start with the Truck Series. 120 laps at Charlotte tonight, and Zach Novak walks away with a 5-second victory over Colton Landis. Pretty much dominated the race, leading 92 of the 120 laps up there at the front. Only one caution. We talked about that earlier. We've had a lot of good racing so far this week, and to have only one caution was a great showing tonight. Matt Bontempi finishes third. Maxime Theriault, I believe is the pronunciation there, is fourth. Brendan Kohler, unfortunately for him, doesn't win tonight, which I know was a shocker, but he rounds out the top five. Joe Lawrence sixth, Jacob Fife seventh, Brandon sixth, a strong run in eighth. James Hudson finishes ninth, and Daniel Holloway 10th. Jacob, as part of the Integrity Racing League, we're seeing the Truck Series kind of as an introductory league for maybe some guys that want to join, that maybe they get thrown into the Cup Series. Talk about that process and how that's working out so far, and what that process is kind of looking like for people.
Yeah, it wasn't the original intent of the Truck Series, but instead of just not allowing people into the Cup Series, which we've kind of cut off recruiting for that in our usual form, we decided to allow people into the Truck Series, get used to how they race, how they interact with the other members who race in the Cup Series and in the Truck Series, and then as spots open up in the Cup Series, allow them to come in and race. But it's really just, like I said, kind of the new member kind of feels us out, how we race, if they like it. And then we're feeling them out as well, as far as the admins are concerned, to see, after a few races, who wants to move up. And I think so far it's working all right. We've had a couple guys who's raced earlier in the season in the Truck Series move up to Cup, and they seem to be doing pretty well. I'm sure there will not. I think I'm sure there will be a few more guys who will fall under that category later in the season. And it's a good way to fairly evaluate people who want to race in the Cup Series without just kind of dumping them in the deep end without knowing what you're getting. And like I said, I say that as far as on both ends of that spectrum. So I think it's working out well so far, and it adds drivers to the Truck Series who may not otherwise run there. So that helps with the racing there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's worked out and helped the numbers. I think we had something like 25 trucks tonight at Charlotte, and maybe we wouldn't have if it wouldn't have been an introductory league. Or I don't like that term introductory league. I don't think you do either, but I think it's maybe helped the truck participation numbers, kind of having that a little bit of a boost there. So let's go ahead and look at the playoff structure for the Cup Series. Turn our attention towards the Cup Series a little bit, and that the chase standings. And this kind of helps us recap the season since we haven't really been on the air a whole lot. We've got 6 different winners amongst drivers that are not pro, i.e., not Matt Busa. So 6 winners so far. Adam De Blasio picks up the Daytona 250 championship there and got to kiss his girlfriend after the race. Guillermo Alvarez wins at Talladega. Yours truly picks up a win last night, Kansas. We'll talk about that in a second. Michael Dole with a great pit stop call. I think we can all admit was a great pit call at Auto Club to steal a victory there. Brendan Kohler, I can't remember where Kohler won. Jacob, can you remind me there?
Now you put
Uh,
me on the spot.
was it Bristol? No, Boostel won Bristol.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of
Yeah,
my
I
head.
can't remember where Kohler won either, but Kohler grabs the victory, and then Patton won Richmond, perhaps. I really can't remember. So those are your non-pro winners. Sorry to those guys for not remembering exactly where they won. But to look at the rest of the chase standings, Jay Heisman, currently the top point getter amongst non-winners. Cody Smith is having a very strong season. He seems to be in good shape. Joshua Campbell having maybe a bit of a surprise season for Josh Campbell to get up there in the point standings. Jacob Fife, maybe a little bit lower than he'd like to be at this point of the season. We'll talk to you in just a second. Brendan Kirkman is in 11th. Christopher Schissler 12th. William Dunn 13th. Kent Wetherell. That would be fantastic to see Kent Wetherell make his way into the chase. That'd be exciting. Eric De Blasio 15th. Matt Bontipi 16th. And a tie there with James Hudson. And then the first 3 out would be Trevor Dalton, Greg Trigo, and Brendan Coppinger. So that kind of sets where we're looking at with the non pro drivers not being eligible. So that's David Rattler is not eligible. Matt Busa is not eligible. Andrew Fayesh is not eligible. I think those are the only 3 for the time being, the main 3. So that kind of sets up the playoff standings. Jacob, talk about your season. You're 63 points to the good, but you know you're probably going to get a couple surprise winners. What are you looking at for the future for your season?
I think I'm doing all right. I know last year, right before the chase cutoff for the regular season, I was right on the edge. Yeah, I was more uncomfortable than I wanted it to be, but I think I'm doing okay. There are some races I'd like to have back, especially the past couple weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, where I've had some not so stellar finishes. Um, but it's a part of it. For the most part, I've kind of stayed clean and out of the way, and so doing that, I believe the finishes will come as long as I keep working towards staying clean and getting respectable finishes. But there's a lot of talent here, so I'm definitely going to have to do better than I believe it was 18th or 19th I finished last night, and I've had a couple of those the past couple of weeks, so we're going to have to step it up a little bit. But I do feel confident I will make it into the chase one way or another.
All right, and that gets us to last night's race at Kansas, and yeah, I'm a little excited because I was able to get my first victory of the year at Kansas. Probably one of my best tracks, and definitely a joy anytime you get a chance to win an Integrity Racing League. A lot of strong competitors were knocked out early in the race due to attrition, and just kind of hung on there for the victory and outran Cody there at the end and took care of the car, and that was the moral of the story. So Cody Smith finishes second. Always a pleasure to run with him and a good finish for him. I know he's not distraught about picking up second. A good run for Eric De Blasio to pick up a top 3, get a podium there. Brandon Six was fast all night. Just I think he got a little unlucky with track position there at the end and where he kind of came out on track. Andrew Fayesh, probably the fastest car much of the night, but picked up some damage towards the end that kind of hurt him there, and he falls back to round out the top 5, but leads the most laps at 46 laps. Brandon Kirkman finishes 6th. James Hudson, a strong run to finish 7th. Jason K. Miller built a beautiful set. Thumbs up, Jason, for the fixed set, and he finishes 8th. Guillermo Alvarez, last week's winner, finishes 9th. And Brian Terry, last year's spring race winner at Kansas, rounds out the top 10. But from an administrative perspective for you, Jacob, only 7 cautions. And I know everybody's like, well, 7 is not a small amount. But when you compare that to the junk that we've seen in NIS all week, where top split, second split, doesn't matter what split, every race has got 13, 14 cautions. from an admin side, I know we had some trouble early, but 7 cautions is not terrible at a track like Kansas.
Yeah, it's an improvement, especially compared to not only NAS but frankly what we've been doing the past couple weeks in our own right, compared to what we expect to do. So that's like I said, it's improvement, but we still have work to do. So obviously, the two bigger cautions that happen in the first part of the race, I'd rather not have. It's great that we only have 7 cautions, but we shouldn't have to take out half the field to do that, or damage half the field to do that. I do, aside from that, from an admin perspective, I do want to say I did notice when you look at the top 10, it's good to see a variety of different people who you may not necessarily see up in the top 10 all the time. I know, obviously, I'm going to be a little bit biased here since they're my teammates, but I know Brandon was running very well at the beginning of the race. Got the pole, which is first pole of his career. So kudos to him on that. And I think Hudson was also running very well up towards the front. But to see, Cody run second as well in the race, just some different variety there. It's definitely good to see. And hopefully, having different people up front and cleaner racing as we go into some of these other racetracks will be more the norm instead of the exception as we go forward.
And the last thing we're going to discuss is the caution count, just to give everybody kind of an update. We maybe wouldn't do this every week, but for the first time this season, we're going to just briefly go through the list and maybe announce drivers that are sitting on their second or third caution. So let's go ahead and pull that up here. You can see Trey Browning picks up his third caution at Kansas. I should emphasize here, and I'm sure Sir Jacob will emphasize as well, these are before any appeals get sit in or handled. But currently, Trey Browning sitting on his third caution, and so would be suspended at Charlotte. Looks like Brandon Coppinger picks up his third incident at Kansas as well, so he would be suspended. Cody Smith is sitting on his second. Matt Bontempi on his second. I'm not going to pronounce Mariu's last name, but he's got 2. Daniel Holloway 2. Lee Pierce has 2. Trevor Dalton, Brandon Six both have 2. Let's see. Brandon Kohler's got 2. Josh Campbell with 2. James Hudson and Brendan Burkroff have 2, as do I, Michael Dole, and it looks like Chris Hollingsworth. So 3 different drivers get suspended for a race, again, pending appeal after Kansas. For somebody that's maybe a little new to the league and doesn't really understand how the process works and what leads up to a suspension, how it all works, and where it kind of came out of, talk us through the caution count and how that's been working out so far this year, Jacob.
Yeah, really, in its most simplest form, the caution count is a way to keep drivers accountable. It's not meant to be something necessarily to bash you over the head with penalties, but by the same time, hopefully, the drivers and members will understand that you have to manage these, especially if you're running for the entirety of the season and you're running for points to get in the chase and things along those lines. So hopefully it'll give you second thought to do moves that might be a little bit more aggressive, or might put you at risk for having another caution instead of just having just the incidents which aren't fault based. You could be not involved in 5 different incidents and actual accidents and still have incidents, to where the caution is an at fault based system and penalizes those who are causing cautions, obviously. So it's really an attempt, and I think some of the people, especially some of the newer guys who may not be used to it, are starting to realize, wait a minute, I'm 11 races through the season now, I've got 2 or 3 cautions. For example, you really have to look beyond just the third caution you're at now. Yes, you get suspended for 1 race, but if you cause 2 more cautions, then you're suspended for 2 races, and that it grows and builds upon itself to where if you keep causing cautions, it'll be detrimental to your point standings or chase standings come later in the season. So hopefully the goal is for the guys to see the bigger picture and kind of look ahead and race accordingly, based on how many cautions you have or how that might adversely affect how your season's going to turn out.
I know that's impacted me. I picked up two cautions, I think, in the first three races of the season. Picked up one at Phoenix, I know, and I think I picked up another one at Auto Club or something like that. And so I know it impacts you and how you drive. I know I've maybe been a little bit more cautious, and I think that's the intent. I've had to be a little bit more cautious since I am sitting on that second caution. Now I've got to win, man. I can miss a race; it's not a big deal. But absolutely.
I know
So
it's coming up.
So we've got a couple of fun races coming up. I know Charlotte, the longest race of the year, is 2 weeks away. Two to Green's going to be hosting an all-star event. It looks like offense defense is going to win the vote. We're going to try some things out as a team, hopefully over the next day or two, to just test it, make sure everything's going to work the way we want it. So keep an eye out for that. So we got a couple of interesting events. We got the Two to Green hosted All Star race coming up next Monday, followed by the 300-mile race at Charlotte, and then it's down to the stretch to see who can make the playoffs. So, Jacob, I'll kind of throw it to you. Last thoughts on what we've seen so far this season, and where we're maybe headed in the future, and what we'd like to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a point in the season where people are going to start to make moves to position themselves for the chase for the end of the season. Hopefully, as I think it's been the overarching theme through the show and obviously the past few weeks, is we're still hunting for the racing to get cleaner. Hopefully, the race we just had tonight in the Truck Series is an indication that it's turning in that direction. Um, so, I would like to see that progress still, especially in the Cup Series, because the talent that is there and the people who race there are certainly capable of doing it. Um, so it's just a matter of implementing it and getting it done, really. But beyond that, as you mentioned, we got an off week for the Cup Series this coming Monday. Tuesday night, the Truck Series will be in Dover. That's always a fun event, especially if you have enough people running to kind of create a couple different lines and things like that. Um, and then uh, 1 week from Monday night, we will do our longest race of the year at Charlotte. Should be a lot of fun, and hopefully everybody will be able to make it out to that. We've been having great fields throughout the course of the season for the Cup Series, which is always good, and hopefully that will continue as well, along with some good, clean racing. Um, as we go forward. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the season, seeing how things shake out, and hopefully being able to get back in the groove of doing these shows again and having you all on as members to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and how your racing's going. So thank you once again, Todd, for getting this back going.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to do each week. Hopefully, we get a little bit more consistent. Like I said, the soccer season was the only reason we didn't do it every week before now, but it looks like we're going to try to get back in the swing of things and hosting this each week. So, thank you for joining us for episode 2. We'll hopefully see you back for episode 3 next week of the Integrity Racing Show. Have a good night.